moment. But
okay.
I appreciate you asking. It was very kind.
We'll only be another 5 seconds.
Okay, we're good to go, Carmen?
Yes, we're all good to go.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Carmen. Go to next slide, please. So good morning, councillors. As Councillor Sarah said, we're talking about the Ross Trevor Street. This item carries on from a report that was tabled at the August Infrastructure Operations Committee, where there was some direction given for Ward Street, and that was agreed and has been fairly much delivered. We're just having a few issues with staffing and COVID issues with getting the final bits of green down on site. But for Ross Trevor Street, it was to come back to talk about that and moving forward. So next. So the current issues that we've got at the moment is, and I guess the purpose of this workshop is to try and get some direction from elected members as to where they would like staff to go. We still have street art on the road. We do have some speed treatment along Ross Trevor Street itself via the form of the I'll call them temporary speed humps, so the pretty yellow and black stripy things that are very abrupt in nature. We do have speed management still in place at the Ross Trevor Tristram intersection, also using those temporary type speed humps. And we have a large number of multicoloured pots sitting in the adjacent park. And I guess just to be clear, there's no funding for any work within the current long-term plan and budgets. Next. So just some, I guess, learnings and some of the evaluation from that work that was done, the temporary closure that we had in place. The surrounding network was able to operate with that section of road closed. There was an issue for traffic that was heading southbound on Tristram Street, so going past the Founders Theatre and then wanting to turn right into Norton Road to go up past Founders Theatre into the big roundabout. So there's not a specific right turn provision there, so that created some difficulties. There was an impact when we had Mill Street closed for events at the stadium, because Ross Trevor Street is obviously the next road down in parallel, but they were considered to be manageable. While there was use made of the area during the closure, via specific events, in general, there's not actually a high demand at this stage, and the feeling is that in time that will come, particularly as we I guess work through and deliver the likes of the NPS UD intensification, more residential and that sort of thing in that northern area of the city, central city. We believe that this is something that could be reassessed in conjunction with some decisions that are made on Founders Theatre and how that's to work, linking into, excuse me, frog, linking into that West Town Belt master plan as well. And then finally, we have noted slower speeds at that Ross Trevor Tristram roundabout as a result of those nasty little speed humps. That has provided better accessibility for pedestrians to get across. It's still not good accessibility, but there does seem to be more situations where cars are just waiting a little bit to let people get through. And so that was just the general learnings and evaluation that we had from that. So next, and I'm going to rattle through this because I'm really hoping that most of the time that we have left, we can actually just have a general discussion with elected members. So basically we looked at some options that could be considered. So these were the options that were presented at the August committee. So that was basically return back to normal, keep some elements, keep the road open, but keep some of the elements. So that's kind of where we're sitting at the moment. Keep the road open and install separated cycle lanes. That would require the removal of parking or close the road. Alongside those sort of core options, there were various, we've described them as add-ons or other components that could be included in combination with those. So commuter parking charging is one of the discussion points that's obviously happening in a separate forum, but needs to recognise that Ross Trevor Street, I guess, is a well-used parking location currently. There's the ability to formalise something at that Tristram Ross Trevor intersection in the form of raised safety platforms and zebra crossings. And also to put something more formal mid-block on Ross Trevor Street, which could be a raised safety platform and zebra crossing. There's also the ability to work in with the work that's coming through with the biking and micromobility planning, and that's to look at a separated cycle facility that could run all the way through from that Tristram to Victoria Street, which could complement doing something in the section that we had closed. Looking at the neighbouring intersections, depending on what we decide to do with Ross Trevor Street, will have an impact on what options we have available at the Tristram Norton intersection. So that's the one on the corner of, it's got Founders Theatre and the cricket stadium. If we keep Ross Trevor Street open, then we could look at closing that slip lane that runs from Norton into Tristram if you want to head north. But if we close Ross Trevor, we need to keep that open and provide a right turn. So depending on what we decide at Ross Trevor Street will have an impact on what we do at that Tristram Norton intersection. We have previously done some investigation work at the big Norton roundabout and options for improvements there for walking and cycling. And finally, as I mentioned, is changing the lanes and phasing of the traffic signals at Tristram Norton. So the next slide tries to push those together and basically say what those add-on options are that could go with any of those things. So I guess to, as I said, keep rattling through, at this stage, what we're really trying to do, so if I can have the next slide, is to get some direction from elected members as to what you would like us to do, what your preference is for us to go away and do some further work on. I did listen in on the lessons learnt workshop that we had on innovating streets, and so I'm just really keen to understand what it is that elected members would like to do now, noting that I think there's a number of opportunities that will be coming along further in the future, such as the Founders Theatre, and as development proceeds, that may be a better time to do something more permanent with Ross Trevor Street, but I'm really keen just to open up to elected members and hear from them. So perhaps, Carmen, we can drop the presentation now, and I'll let Councillor Sarah perhaps manage that process if that suits.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Robin. We'll start with, I'm going to assume that the order on here is the order of hand. So we'll start with Ryan.
Thanks, Sarah. So, okay, a couple of questions, and then I'll just leave my comments. Yep, we can go with that. Cool, thanks. Thanks, Robin. Two questions. One is, do we know what volumes of traffic come through this intersection in comparison to the Ward Street Innovating Street trial? Has this got a greater volume or a lesser volume?
So I'm going to apologise for the fact that I'm probably not as well prepared as I could be, but I've spent the last couple of days in Coroner's Court. My belief is that the traffic volumes are less here, that it's actually the Norton Road that carries the dominant flow. What I would note is that we haven't had normal traffic flows in and around that area for quite some time with the COVID testing station that's been running at Founders. And so we have seen some significant and lengthy closures of Norton Road to accommodate all of the queuing of cars, and therefore Ross Trevor Streets has been busier. But in general, if we go back to pre-2020, lower traffic volumes than Ward Street.
Okay, because I guess just a caveat there, I'd want to see data on the volumes, because I know anecdotally it was putting people off even coming into town or reducing, because they would be, when it was closed, they'd end up spinning around and not actually entering into some of those more inner city streets. The other question I have is, as you mentioned, there's no money for this in the LTP or anything. So is this only getting visibility because it was cherry-picked for the Innovating Streets project?
You mean that was the project came up because of Innovating Streets? Yes, it wasn't one, the Ross Trevor Street section of road itself wasn't one that we had planned. The intersection of Tristram and Ross Trevor was that one that we did actually have sitting in our books through our low cost, low risk program in years 2 or 3. So there was a little bit of work planned for that intersection, but not the block itself.
Thanks. So I'll just move into my comments then. It does feel like we're looking at something that we're not actually ready to deal with, because it seems like there's no integration with, you know, if with respect to active transport, if we're going to make it more cycle friendly, again, we've got a situation that seems a little bit isolated from the rest of the network. So to me, this just feels premature trying to address it. And equally with the vehicles, I note in the learnings it says the surrounding network can operate with this section closed, but I do feel like it's a bit like saying a human can operate with one arm. Yes, it can operate, but the functionality we got back, I saw on social media, was some of the most raucous I've seen, certainly in my time. So in terms of direction, I guess my preference would be to return to pre-Innovating Street style. I would be open to retaining some elements, but I need to see what they were first. And I certainly wouldn't want to do anything like what we did on Ward Street. And I'd also want some robust community feedback, because Innovating Street was everything about how not to approach the community. And I do have some hope, because I know recently, Robin, you and the team with the Dutch roundabout, you got it peer reviewed. The modelling suggested, hey, actually this isn't fit for purpose, and you gave us a much more nuanced response, and I think that was much more palatable across elected members in the community. So I would like to see a similar approach with something like this, and I definitely don't think it should be given priority. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Next we've got Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And thanks, Robin. Just a couple of questions. One is around the cyclists using Ross Trevor Street, either during or post the Innovating Street sort of period. Have we got sort of numbers that give us an indicator as to how that street or how that area was actually picked up by cyclists and used?
I'll just check. I think Martin Parks is on the line to see if Martin's got that to hand, or whether that's something we'll have to dig out for you, Councillor.
We haven't got that. I haven't got that information to hand, but I mean the numbers, to be honest with you, from my memory, weren't huge, and the reason that is, you know, the network leading up to that location isn't particularly cycle friendly. So until you make those connections cycle friendly, you know, you're going to be in a sort of Clauden's Bridge situation where the numbers are suppressed.
Yep, okay. And my second question is around the future of the Founders Theatre, which hasn't been part of the discussion today. I assume if the building remains in some form or another, we are going to need some parking options, and Ross Trevor Street would be one of the streets that was frequently used for Founders Theatre events, and I assume that would continue. But if the building is demolished, which is the other option and the one that has up until now been a preferred option, won't we then have a bit of a greenfield site there that we could design off-street, off-road cycle areas that might be better than putting, some form of cycle lanes, concreted separate cycle lanes in Ross Trevor Street at this stage, given that you then would have access not only to Norton Road, but also to Seddon Road. And I forget the name of the street that runs around the back of the entranceway to Seddon Park. I think that is that Seddon Road too, is it?
Seddon Road's parallel to Tristram.
Yeah. So if that was, a park or whatever we wanted to turn the Founders site into, then we could have an opportunity to build off-street cycleways in and around that park.
So I would agree, Councillor Rob, and I guess that was one of the reasons why I put, the Founders Theatre discussion into the mix, because where that lands does provide opportunities for, I guess, not only the sort of, let's say, east-west along Ross Trevor Street, but also that north-south linkage opportunities for cycling. And I think it also gives us the ability to look with the biking and micromobility as to how that plan, as to what the bigger picture looks like, so that we don't end up with those short sections.
So given that we've got a deadline to the end of March for the Founders Theatre Group, we're only sort of days away from, something that might happen, or something that we might be working to have happen on that site. So I just wonder whether, a delay for a month or two on a final outcome for the Ops Committee might not be a bad idea. Not saying that the work that's been done here is not very valuable and useful, but it just might be a trigger point that could open up a box of other alternatives that we currently haven't considered in there.
Yes. So I guess the soonest we will be reporting anything to the Infrastructure Ops would be the 31st of May meeting. Okay. So that timeline sounds sensible, depending, I guess, on what the final outcome is for Founders Theatre.
Okay. And I'm a little bit with Ryan on this. I think at this stage, I would like to see Ross Trevor Street return to what it was pre-innovation. But look, like Martin, I've got an open mind, and I'm keen to listen to all the voices of the hands up that are following me. Thank you. Thanks.
Can I just at this stage, it's for Councillor Ryan and Councillor Rob, what we've got in place at the moment is that obviously formalised slightly, because some of the speed humps are temporary in nature. Is that an acceptable finished product when you talk about returning to pre-innovating streets, but with some elements retained?
And jumping ahead of Ryan, I would like to see those ones changed to something more permanent. I think the speed humps on that particular roundabout are useful, but certainly the ones that are there in my smart car, it's really difficult to get over them, and it jolts me around quite a bit. So, but yes, but some permanent ones similar to the Ward Street, to the Bryce Street, Anglesey Street, would be a good alternative, because a lot of cars do go through that particular roundabout during the day.
So I guess in my head I'm sort of thinking that something that looks a bit like the Te Araha Grey type intersection, at that intersection, and potentially, and this is where it ties in with that Founders Theatre decision, if we had some sort of path that determined a logical location for a mid-block road safety platform, and it doesn't necessarily have to be smack in the middle, it's about where it logically kind of fits. Is that sort of thing that you'd be comfortable with, Councillor Rob?
Yes, although I prefer the Bryce Street speed humps than
the whole intersection
than the Te Arawa Street ones.
Okay.
The Te Arawa Street ones are more designed for pedestrians and cars. That's just my view. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Quick follow on. Thanks, Sarah. I don't think I can recall what it's like, Robin, because it's still. I mean, we've had the COVID cones out. We've got the coloured multi-pots. So the whole site's really confused aesthetically. I don't actually think it's what's the word for what's that? What's the favourite phrase I like to use, Sarah and Robin?
Self-explaining.
Self-explaining. It's not self-explaining. It's self-confusing. So I think some of that stuff would help removing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Yep. So removal of the pots and that in the general area is obviously part of just that sort of tidying up and returning it to just being a normal street in the network.
Cool. Thanks, Robin, Ryan. Martin.
Yeah, obviously, if you go back to normal, I'll prepare my formal apology speech to the day we launched it and the enthusiasm. And when we talk to stakeholders, there are a heap of stakeholders, and there was huge excitement on that day of launching that project. And I'll be delivering a formal apology for wasting those people's time and deep regret. Robin, how many car parks are we talking about on that stretch?
I'm going to phone a friend again. Martin, do you have any idea? It must be 40 odd, is it?
Yeah, I'm going to say 40 plus.
All right, say 40. Let's cut to the chase. That is utterly irrelevant to whether or not the Founders Theatre stays or goes. The Founders Theatre, as it was, is not obviously in the new model, and we'll see what the proposals are. So I think that's superfluous. Obviously, the only thing would be what facility would the West Town Belt ever have for sort of major event parking or whatever. So with respect, I think that's something of a red herring, actually. That's not to say that the form of that area may be different if the Founders is there versus if it's not there. I do get that. So just the quick, simple feedback is I like the pots, I like the street artwork, that is Hope's. And to me, if my preference is two-stage thing, long term, I'd love to see that stretch closed and it returned to the West Town Belt in some form. In the interim, Robin, what is the legal thing is to cement what we have there at the moment, which is basically 30k speed humps, and get rid of the parking immediately, straight away, the commuter parking now. I mean, we've had situations where I've seen red cones there. There was no parking. Life went on. It looked good. And then suddenly the red cones disappeared. And then within about a week, all those freebie commuter parkers came back into that area. So in terms of a fairly short process, what's involved in us declaring it, firming it up as at least a 30k, no parking, and then you coming back to us with regard to a midway pedestrian crossing of speed humps. That's sort of as the first part of a journey, I think, long term to closing it off completely.
Thanks, Martin. I'm just going to say, Robin, maybe it's best to answer these kind of questions in the report or something, because we started off late. We're just really tight on time, but definitely get everyone's feedback, I think, and then we'll take those questions to the report, if that's okay.
Okay, so my feedback is the ultimate is the West Town Belt, basically returning it to the West Town Belt long term. But in the short term is what strategy could we do to at least reinforce what we have there. It doesn't stop the lovely cars going through, but they just have to slow down to 30k and making it safer. But immediately, like yesterday, get rid of that commuter parking. They have no need to be there, frankly.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, I think I've got Dave next.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks, Robin. Look, I mostly agree with what Martin said, though there's one part I don't, and that's where I agree with Rob. I do think it's probably premature to make any final decision on that while we don't know the future of Founders Theatre. I think that when we're designing things like this or changing design, looking at change designs, we need to know what the whole precinct looks like or is going to look like before we decide where traffic flows and parking should and shouldn't happen. So in principle, I support Martin. Actually, I'd be a bit stronger than that. If you look at all of our roads that go through parks, that town belt around there, that one linking to Ross Trevor Street is the only one that doesn't actually have any reason to be there other than to cut a path through the parkway. It doesn't actually have anything directly alongside it on either side. It's never taken a lot of traffic, having been a regular user of that link for many, many years. Norton Road, like Robin said, is the preeminent one, except at the moment because of the testing station there. And the speed at which cars slingshot around the big roundabout there onto Ross Trevor when they do go down there is actually quite dangerous. And so it's good that we've got humps and things there. I think we should have bigger ones if we're going to keep it open. But even more so, there's another aspect. We've looked at Tristram Street being the sort of preeminent north-south through route in the past for traffic that doesn't need to go actually into the CBD. And we've had that sort of discussion in relation to the Collingwood Street corner as well. I think we need a whole area plan before we go and rejig any more intersections along there. And I think that includes the future of Founders. My preference is for what we did before or something. I think it should be just green space, full stop, and put some of that instant grass down over the tarmac and let's go for it. But that's too soon to actually have that as the final answer. Let's see what we're trying to do in the whole area. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Next up, I have Maxine.
Thank you. Look, I largely agree with Dave and Martin on this. I think that we have established a long-term vision for that bit of road, but actually the timing isn't now. I think that we do have a responsibility, though, in the medium term to be able to identify what it is that we do want in that area, and without having a really clear understanding of the uses of it. And I guess, Robin, I'd want to know who's parking there, how long are they parking, is there turnover of those car parks, what time are they free, is it really people coming in from out of town to get a free park for the day, have a bit of an understanding about the use of those car parks before I dump them. I did enjoy when it was closed during the trial, and I thought that was a really great vision for us to be able to try and achieve long term. I think there's some real gains that have been made in terms of the behaviour of the cars at both of those roundabouts, and that to achieve a much slower zone is too much of a gain to give up straight away. So returning it to trial isn't something that I'd like to entertain. I use often the Te Aroha Grey Street Jada bars, and they work really well. You have to go slowly, and that allows pedestrians to take the opportunity to cross safely. It stops anybody trying to slingshot their way around 3 exits to get to a right-hand turn, and it's just a much safer way to be able to do it. I'd also like to know, though, whether there is the opportunity for co-funding of that through a low cost, low risk opportunity, if that's available. And I guess if I had to choose an option, it'd be to retain some of the elements that are there. Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
But I get Rob's point about trying to get around the first part of it when you come off the large roundabout to the Jada bars. If you haven't got your wheels straight onto that Jada bar, it means 4 bumps all sorts of ways in your car, and you know that's a pretty uncomfortable way. Cheers.
Thanks, Maxine. Okay, we've got Jeff next, and I guess because we started late, if we just keep it to what we want to feed back to Robin as succinctly as possible, we can all debate it when it comes to the chamber. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, cheers, Sarah. Look, I'm in the camp of we need a cohesive plan here. We don't want to be ad hoc, and what we do with founders is really significant because it gives us a chance to kind of redesign the whole area and do something special. So I think it's just it's not a good decision to do something ad hoc in the meantime, I don't think. We're going to know about founders soon and make a call. So in terms of the cycling mentioned, I just want to re-emphasise the idea of cycling on green instead of grey. You've got parkland there. That's where cycles could be going across that, rather than on the road. Can you remind me, apart from those horrendous yellow Jada bars or whatever they are that have already broken my my bike's mudguards once, what other elements are there at the moment? Because as Ryan says, it's bloody hard to remember what's actually in place right now.
Yeah, so I guess there's those very pretty yellow and black speed humps at the intersection at Tristan Ross Trevor, and then a couple along the length of Ross Trevor Street. And the street art is still in place in Ross Trevor Street. There is a large planter at each end of Ross Trevor Street at the roundabouts. And then we have the planters that we took off Ward Street and that we used in Ross Trevor Street are sitting in the park adjacent to it. So they do they're very visual in that sort of area. So I'm getting the feeling that, at least removal of them would be a really good starting point for returning to something that looks more normal, I guess.
Yeah. Well, look, I would get rid of the street art now. I'd put the planter boxes in front of the businesses that are getting ramroded continually, as we did at Midas and Barton Street, and that's successful. I'd get rid of them too. And I'd get rid of those brutal yellow speed humps before people start sending us a bill. So, I mean, I think we can restore it in the meantime, but to close to what it was. But a big decision comes once we've got a decision on founders, for me.
Thanks, Jeff.
Oh.
Okay. Paula.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to duck out to fall in between, but I've heard most of the debate. So if I go over my box.
Your sound's a little bit funky.
Is that? My laptop, you can hear me better now. Can you hear me now?
That is better.
What? Anyway, okay, so I'm talking to my laptop, but I'm looking at the other screen. Bear with. It works. Just in terms of my feedback, I'm really keen, and along the lines of, I've heard a couple of other speakers talk about the not doing anything ad hoc at this point in time, but integrating with whatever the permanent solution for the West Town Belt would be. Now, I am aware, for example, that we always have intentions of putting an off-road, which I love those, off-road cycleway through that park, linking to the stadium and, well, you know, linking to town, linking to the stadium and through that parkland. I know for a fact that some of that is planned, though I haven't seen the map for a while, to go through Margaret's Cherry Grove, which would be beautiful. Would be a lovely, safe way of people cycling through that area without being on the road at all, which is always my preference. So what work, Robin, is being done in terms of that? Where are we at? I understand it's in the long-term plan, but not for some considerable time. So rather than do something else on Ross Trevor Street itself, why would we not bring the funding forward and do it through on the park, through the trees? Pretty lovely, safe, not in any conflict with vehicles. Just that, and how that connects with potentially in the future with the Western Rail Trail. I know that the cricket ground provides some sort of barrier to the Western Rail Trail being connected with that Norton Road roundabout thing. But we need to think about the connectivity of the cycleway through our green spaces. Massive fan of that. Massive fan of everything that can go through our gullies, our parks, or our pipes. You'll be pleased to know, Sarah, I've come to the view of pipes are good.
Cool, thank you, Mayor Porter. And Kesh.
Thanks, Sarah. Just to quickly add that I don't think we should be doing much at all until we have a clear picture of what we want, what the purpose is, what the, what do we actually want to achieve in that area. I agree that we should wait to see what happens with founders and then make it look nice at once instead of doing stuff randomly and changing and getting everyone angry about it. We need to ask the community properly and do it properly and not, like someone said, ad hoc. So I'm in favor of let's just chill out, wait, get it done right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kesh. Is there anyone else who would like to provide feedback before I give mine?
Chair Sarah,
Yeah.
I put my hand down when you told us not to talk about the only ask questions, right? In terms of what needs to come back. You didn't want to
Sorry,
know
no, it
our
wasn't to
opinion.
only ask questions. It was to ask questions, but not for Robin to answer everything right now because we're running out of time for that, but that Robin can take all those questions back.
So did you want our opinion or you wanted us to wait for the debate?
So note flag any questions that you have and then give your feedback, Ewan.
Right. Well, my first feedback is I think you're chairing this very well. I like the fact that you go out and you ask other people first before we hear your opinion. I think that's a really good example of good chairing. So thank you for that.
I follow Angela's example. So
yeah, and she's good at that too.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that because I think that's what a chair should do. My feedback is, look, I had a lot of feedback from the community when we did this innovative trial, and other than the few people on the day when we opened it, and Monique and I went along, a lot of it was negative. I do support, however, a pedestrian crossing long term. I do support a speed reduction and the speed bump, but I also support keeping the parking, because I got a lot of feedback from people who simply felt that it was an important route into the city for them, and that some use it for parking. I am comfortable with the fact that we need founders to be resolved before any long-term strategy, and as such, I would support a very little amount of funds being spent until we've had that more meaningful debate. That's my feeling. Just felt that I needed to say that.
Thanks, Ewan. We've got Mark.
Hi everyone, coming to you from COVID Central.
Yeah, I hope you're feeling a bit better or not too horrible.
Yeah, no, not too bad. Just sweating. The fever is not that great, but I won't bore you with those details. I agree. Hey, what's that?
You look terrible, just so you know.
Yeah, you should be in bed, Mark, and take a few days out.
Oh no, the council work must go on. Hey, look, I agree with mostly what about with everything that's been said in general. Parking, especially what Ewan just picked up on, is one thing I was going to say. We've got quite a bit of inner city dwelling going on as well, so let's not forget that not all of the people that live in the inner city, they have friends and family that come and visit. They're going to want places to park as well. So, big fan of that. Plus the emergency services that are in and around the area who need to access roads quickly, and they don't want to be slowed down by I can't remember what the word was that Jeff used, but I don't like those yellow speed bumps either. So that would be my that's my piece. Leave it as it. I mean, restore it to what it was and move on.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, was that everyone? So just quickly, Robin, my thoughts are, I think we have to take a big picture view of this, because we have the potential to create a really special inner city park in the West Town Belt. And personally, I think that there's huge merit in looking at potentially closing off this street to create a continuous, large, open space where we can have something that really serves that purpose of a usable inner city park. But I think that it has to be done in conjunction with each other. So if we want people to actually use, if you close the street but have nothing there, it's not going to, no one's going to use it, and it's going to look like a wasteland. So I 100% support taking a really integrated approach with this, and joining it up also with any future planning for cycle scooter connections, so that when you do put it all together, it makes sense to people. I think a lot of people did feel frustrated with the closure, but the feedback I got was largely around the right turn going onto Norton Road, and if we change the signals to make that easy and safe, then that's going to solve a lot of the issues that people had. So an integrated approach is really important. But in the meantime, I'm just keen to understand what we could do without risking too much doubling up or double handling with putting infrastructure in, just to keep those crossing points around the roundabout, because they're really useful. And at the other end also, where it connects with the large roundabout, being able to cross there has been extremely useful for people coming from the Maiaroa area and things. So, but I don't want to be putting in, say, a middle crossing and then finding it's not in the right place. So if we can be really strategic and thoughtful about what we could put in. I actually don't like the black and yellow jutta bars either on a bike. That is awful as well.
They are a temporary measure, and
they nearly knocked Leo off my bike seat. So that's me. Thank you.
That's brilliant.
Cool.
Thank you, councillors. I think that's probably certainly done our time, but been really useful for us to understand what we can bring back to you to a committee meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for being succinct. We made it with just a few minutes